picture this. It's the fall of 2008, and the entire world is holding its breath. The global financial system, the very foundation of our modern world, is just moments away from a total collapse. And the question everyone was asking was, how on earth did we get here? Well, it all really came to a head on September 29th, 2008. That's the day the U.S. House of Representatives voted no on a massive $700 billion bailout for the banks. The market's reaction? It was instant, and it was brutal. The Dow Jones Industrial Average tanked, dropping 770 points in a single day. And this wasn't just some Wall Street drama. No, this was panic everywhere. It's like the river of money that keeps our whole world running just froze solid. Banks, absolutely terrified of who was going to fail next, just stopped lending money to anyone, even each other. Institutions that had been around for over 150 years, like Lehman Brothers, they didn't just stumble, they just vanished. And that's the real mystery here, isn't it? Because this whole catastrophe didn't start in the fancy boardrooms of London or Tokyo. Nope. It started on quiet suburban streets, inside ordinary American houses. So how did a problem with mortgages, just home loans, end up triggering a financial earthquake that almost brought down the entire planet? Well, let's peel back the layers and figure this out. Okay, to really get this, we've got to rewind a few years before the big crash. Because the seeds of this whole disaster were planted in the American housing market, which at the time was in the middle of a massive and, as we found out, totally unsustainable boom. Right at the center of this whole thing was something called a subprime mortgage. Basically, these were loans for people who, wouldn't normally get one. Folks with poor credit scores who'd usually be turned away. But during the housing boom, lenders weren't just saying yes. They were practically begging to give these loans out. But wait, it gets even crazier. They came up with something that got the nickname Ninja Loan. And yeah, that stands for exactly what it sounds like. No income, no job, or assets. We're not just talking about bad credit here. We're talking about zero proof that you could ever pay the loan back. Lenders were basically handing out hundreds of thousands of dollars based on the honor system. And look, this isn't just theory. Get this. There was a real case of a strawberry picker making just $14,000 a year who was loaned every single cent he needed to buy a $724,000 house. I mean, do the math. There is just no way that works. But in the mid-2000s, loans like this were getting approved all the time. So what happens when you pour all this easy money into the system? Well, it's pretty predictable. Home ownership rates soared to an all-time high right before they came crashing down. A gigantic housing bubble was forming, all built on a foundation of incredibly risky debts. Which leads to the big question, why on earth were banks making these insane loans? Well, the answer is they weren't worried, because they'd built this incredible new money-making machine. See, they had no intention of actually holding on to these risky loans. Instead, their whole plan was to package them up and sell them off. And the engine of this machine was something called a mortgage-backed security, or MBS. Now, the idea itself is actually pretty straightforward. You just take thousands of different mortgages, all those monthly payments from homeowners, bundle them all together, and turn it into a brand new investment, kind of like a bond, that you can sell to investors anywhere in the world. So think of it like an assembly line for money. Step 1, your local bank makes the loan. Step 2, they take that loan, along with thousands of others, and sell the whole bundle to a huge investment bank on Wall Street. Step 3, Wall Street works its magic, slicing and dicing that pool of loans into these new securities, the MBS. And finally, step 4, they sell those MBS to big-time investors all over the globe, like pension funds, who are all just looking for a safe, steady investment. And this is the absolute key to the whole mess. That local bank, the one that gave the loan to the strawberry picker, they didn't really care if he could pay it back. Why? Because they made their money right away by selling his loan to Wall Street. This was the originate and distribute system, and it meant the risk didn't stay with the lender. It got passed down the line to the final investor, who might be on the other side of the world and had no idea what they were actually buying. Okay, but you might be thinking, hold on a second, weren't there referees, gatekeepers? People whose entire job was to check this stuff and warn investors if it was risky? And yeah, there were. They were called credit rating agencies, and they were maybe the most important piece of the whole puzzle. You've got this tiny club, really, just 3 big companies, S&P, Moody's, and Fitch, that control pretty much the entire market. Their whole business is built on trust. They're supposed to be the impartial experts who look at an investment and give it a grade, from super safe to super risky. And the best grade they can give, the absolute gold standard, is AAA. When something gets a AAA rating, it's supposed to mean it is rock solid, as safe as it gets. It's the seal of approval that tells the biggest investors in the world, hey, you can put your retirement money here and sleep soundly at night. And this is where the whole thing just goes completely off the rails. The rating agencies were giving these mortgage-backed securities, these things filled with ninja loans and other toxic debt, their highest possible rating, AAA. The promise was ultimate safety, but the reality was a ticking time bomb. So why? Why would they do this? Well, it all comes down to a massive conflict of interest. The same investment banks selling the MBS were also paying the agencies to rate them. Just listen to this quote from a former analyst at Moody's. She said she'd flag 100 bonds that needed to be downgraded for risk, and her bosses would send back a list of only 25 with no explanation. The pressure was on to keep the party going. So by 2008, the stage was set for an absolute catastrophe. You had the housing bubble built on terrible loans, this financial machine spreading the risk everywhere, and the referees were paid to look the other way. All it took was for housing prices to stop rising and for people to start missing payments. And then the dominoes started to fall. And when it all started to unravel in September 2008, it happened fast. I mean, breathtakingly fast. On the 15th, Lehman Brothers goes bankrupt. The very next day, the government has to take over the insurance giant AIG for $85 billion. Then comes the market crash on the 29th, and finally, on October 3rd, Congress pushes through the massive TARP bailout to try and stop the bleeding. And we have to remember, this wasn't just numbers on a screen. This had devastating real-world consequences. This wasn't just a Wall Street problem. As the housing bubble burst, the entire real economy seized up. Unemployment shot through the roof. We're talking about millions of people who lost their jobs, their homes, and their life savings. So the government had to step in, and the number they came up with was just staggering. $700 billion. That was the initial price tag for the Troubled Asset Relief Program, or TARP. The whole idea was to use that money to buy up the toxic junk from the banks and get them lending again before we fell into another Great Depression. After the dust settled, the government tried to make sure this would never happen again. In 2010, they passed a huge piece of legislation called the Dodd-Frank Act. It created new consumer protection agencies and a whole host of new rules for Wall Street, all designed to prevent a sequel to the crisis. So, the system was patched up. But it leaves you wondering, right? The 2008 crisis was caused by a new, complex financial invention that almost nobody really understood until it was too late. And in a world where finance is always innovating, always creating the next new thing, what's the blind spot we're all missing today?